Sometimes we need to download new programs into our computers, and the solution is quite easy. We just go to the developer site and download from there. We don't need to worry about the model of our computer or which is our operating system. Everything just works.
But on mobile, it is very different. On mobile phones, it doesn't work quite like that.
Yes, that's because they have app stores.
So, if app stores are so cool, if they are like the evolution of what happens on PC, why are they the #1 concern for so many app developers? Well, app stores themselves are a good idea, but the behavior of specific app stores raises some doubts. There are a couple of dominant app stores that, in absence of effective alternatives, get too much power in the market, and they use that power to impose unfair obligations and restrictions on developers. For example, developers are forced to pay a revenue share fee to these stores when a user pays for their app. Whereas on PC, the developer gets all the revenue because they sell their app directly to the user, with no intermediate actor, like an app store. Did you know that all those issues have the same root cause? On Android, there are more than 20 app stores, but one of them generates 98% of all the user traffic. The other 20 stores combined generate the remaining 2% of the user traffic. As a result, 84% of the developers cannot justify the cost of launching their apps in alternative app stores. They are forced to focus their limited resources in the dominant ones. As a matter of fact, it can take up to 130,000 euros to adapt one app to one alternative app stores. This means that the developers would need to invest over 2 million euros to launch their app across all available app stores. It is true that dominant stores don't make the cost of porting apps to alternative stores intentionally higher, but the user volume dominance creates a bottleneck effect that harms rival app stores. The question we could ask ourselves is, how did the Google Play Store acquire 98% of all the users? What did they do exceptionally better than the other app stores? Well, first of all, the only way to access that dominant app store is as a pre-install. Remember that this store has access to the 100% of all the apps in the market, whereas rival stores lack the 84% of those apps. In order to be able to access that dominant app store and install it in their phones, manufacturers and telecommunication operators are forced to place it exclusively in the home screen of the phones, which is the most efficient spot for user acquisition. And they have to ensure absence of any other rival app store next to the dominant one. On top of that, the gatekeeper store benefits from privileged default settings on the phone. For example, when a user tries to download an app from alternative store, the user needs to enable this option first from the phone settings, if they manage to find where that option is. Otherwise, this download from alternative stores would be technically blocked automatically. Additionally, the dominant app stores set arbitrary security measures that discourage users from downloading content from alternative app stores, like warning messages, saying that an app could be unsafe and risky for the users, when in reality, it is not necessarily.
So, wait, let me get this straight. Smartphone manufacturers and carriers have to pay to get the dominant app store pre-installed in their own phones. Shouldn't it be the other way around?
Yes, and they also pay to deprioritize their own app stores. Because, remember, they are not allowed to place competing stores next to the dominant one. So they have to hide their stores somewhere else, deeper in the phone, making it more difficult for users to find them.
Did you know that dominant stores avoid launching their own apps in rival alternative stores? Probably you can guess why they keep these top apps exclusively available inside their own app store.
Is it because they don't have enough money to port their apps to other app stores?
You're not paying attention. The reason is this: when a rival store has not apps, they have no users. And this absence of users allows the gatekeeper stores to preserve their market dominance. Users avoid stores that lack content for obvious reasons, and developers will avoid stores that lack users. And as a result, the content gap between the gatekeeper stores and the rival ones keeps the market dominance uncontested. So, if we ever dream to have a competitive digital market where app stores can compete, incentivizing innovation and benefiting both developers and users, starting by solving the content gap is critical. But there's a second problem in addition to the content gap. Let's imagine that we have two drink vending machines. One of them has all the drinks in the world, whereas the other store only has soda. So, as a user, you would be inclined to go to the machine that has all the drinks, right? Not many users would go to a drink machine that only has soda when they can choose another that has everything. So already at that level of content gap, the competition opportunity for both machines is not really fair, right? But on top of that, there is cup needed to drink, to avoid having to drink with our hands. The problem is that the cup is exclusively tied to the dominant machine. In the real world, this cup would mean the tools needed for the apps to run well on the user phones, to run as those apps were designed for. And if we pay attention to the Digital Markets Act that the European Union has recently released, there are platforms benefiting from these strong network effects that are often embedded in their own ecosystem. The Digital Markets Act calls this practice envelopment. So when combining these two factors, the content and the tools gap, they provide a massive head start advantage to the gatekeeper dominant stores, which would be like having the dominant stores start the competition almost at the finish line.
Clearly, this is not a fair competition situation. How do we fix this?
We can fix it with two words: fair and open solutions.
Imagine that instead of having different stores and the users having to learn how to use each of them, with the subsequent confusion of different experiences when using the same app in different platforms, the user could choose any interface they want to access and run those apps. This is actually what happens already quite satisfactorily on computers. Same program, same behavior, regardless of the device that the user chose. This allows users to select their favorite store based on real merits, design and colors, or maybe the editors are funnier in one store than in another, etc. But users should not base their decision on the content that those stores can offer, respectively, since we are mostly talking about free-to-download content. Can you imagine that if you bought a specific PC brand like Lenovo or HP, you would not be able to access to part of the internet? This would be unacceptable, right?
So, the user should have the freedom to choose their interface as they prefer, without sacrificing their experience or the apps they can have access to.
Like that, if the user wants to drink soda and those are available in the machine that the user selected, the user would reach the soda. But if the user wants to drink iced tea and this is not available in the machine that the user selected, the user would be able to access the iced tea. Please remember, we are talking about free-to-download apps from the dominant app store without having to abandon its preferred alternative store. The security of the user of this solution would be protected, but not through arbitrary measures that vary from one store to another. Instead, there could be a neutral solution, impartial and objective across all stores. This means that, in case the soda or the iced tea had any virus, this security system would stop the infected app, for the right reason, in a fair way. And if none of those apps has any security issue, the protection measures would allow both of them, no matter if the apps arrived from the dominant store or not.
The monetization of those apps would remain unaffected, as it would belong to the store of origin of each app. For example, if the iced tea came from the gatekeeper store, the gatekeeper doesn't lose the right to monetize the iced tea app.
So, let me get this right. With this solution, the dominant store is not prevented from continuing its business normally, and the developers can reach all the users without having to create different versions of their app. One version would be enough to cover all the 20 stores?
That is correct! But the best of all is that this solution already exists, and it's open source. So it doesn't cost any money, and everyone can check the code and confirm that it's safe. As a user, you can search your app, download it, ensure that security-wise everything is okay, you can install it, run it, and keep it updated.
Okay, so this sounds like a very good solution to the content gap problem that benefits everyone: developers, users, the rival stores, and the dominant stores too.
Yes, but what about the problem too? The access to the app tools, like the cup that we referred to in the example. What is the point of fixing the access to all the apps if those apps cannot be used in phones outside the gatekeeper control?
The problem is that unlike it happens on computers, those dominant store tools needed for the apps to run as intended are not openly available publicly. On computers, when your printer needs a driver, users can download it from the web for free. On mobile, when an app needs this component to run well, users outside the gatekeeper control cannot download it from the web. This means that users who are brave enough to select a device other than the dominant ones cannot run most of their apps correctly. These users would actually receive off-putting messages saying, "This app will not run well because you are missing this tool component," but it will not give you the option to download it from anywhere.
So what is the reason for the gatekeeper to avoid making this component needed for apps to run well openly available?
It is unlikely that developers designed their apps to have issues on the phones of users who selected alternative platforms. Therefore, the gatekeeper can make this component publicly available to all users who need it. Alternatively, the gatekeeper could allow alternative solutions that do the same work than the gatekeeper tools, ensuring that apps work as intended.
Again, with this solution for problem 2, the dominant app store doesn't lose any opportunity to do business in a fair way. The developers would not need to make any extra effort for their apps to work well everywhere, and the security of the users would not be compromised because they are using the same app as before.
That is correct. The best of all, again, is that this solution also already exists, and again, it is also open source and legal, and therefore free and secure to use.
So if the solutions are so easy and they are available, why they're not being used openly yet?
Because the terms and conditions of the dominant stores threaten to ban those users and developers who use these solutions.
That's terrible. Because on top of preventing the user experience problem from being solved, this perpetuates the dominant situation of the gatekeeper stores, avoiding rivals from competing in a fair way.
Luckily, the EU Digital Markets Act has something to say about this. It says that any rule that dominant stores set for the distribution of apps that limit the ability for developers to use alternative app stores and the ability of users to effectively choose among different app stores should be prohibited, because these rules would be unfair under the European Union regulation. So, there are many developers and users that hope that this new regulation will help to create a higher level of competitive fairness and user freedom in the digital market, so that everyone can enjoy fair content access and the possibility to use this content effectively.